You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello and welcome once again to another journey into the unknown, the unexplored, the unexplained. Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And tonight, I think we're going to do our first real lycanthrope episode on the case of the South End werewolf.
And
contemporary too, right?
Contemporary, yeah. It isn't the kind of werewolf that you hear about in the movies with the teeth and everything, or some weird thing wandering in the forest. This is about a real person.
A real person, folks.
Yeah, his name was Bill Ramsey.
I don't think I would want this to happen to me. I would never want, if you think of all the things that could happen to you, can you imagine being cursed to be a werewolf and you never know when it's going to happen?
Well, can you imagine if that's what people remember about you?
Well, I would imagine that's all they remember about you is, oh, that's that weirdo that turns into like a crazy man.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and give Mr. Ramsey a little bit of slack and read about him and tell his side of it. Yeah. Born and bred in the Essex seaside town of Southend. The first bit of trouble came when William Ramsey was just 9 years old. Like any other normal child, he was outside in his back garden when he began to feel strange. It was one Saturday afternoon in 1952 when an icy blast of frigid cold swept all over him. And perspiration froze on his skin, and a foul stench came close to making him vomit. And he didn't know what to do about it. He was bewildered, and he only had two things on his mind: running away to a life on the ocean wave, and wolves. By this time, he was close to the garden fence, and only the calls of his mother brought him out of whatever was bothering him. However, something else took control of him instead. Intense and pure rage had installed itself firmly within his psyche. Using this and the adrenaline-fueled strength that he now possessed, he had uprooted a fence post, with the fence still attached to it, and he was swinging it like a club. And not even his parents could easily remove the post with their bare hands. They were trying to get it away from him. What the child did next made both of his parents run back into the relative safety of their home, leaving him isolated outside. Bill Ramsey placed the wire meshing onto his mouth and began gnawing at it. The cold sensations returned, and a low growl came from deep from within him, and both his parents remained inside the house until it was apparent that their son had calmed down.
For nearly 15 years after that, the terrifying incident, nothing even remotely similar happened in the life of Bill Ramsey. He grew up, got married, and became a doting father of 3. The first 2 years of his marriage, though, were plagued by nightmares, and each dream was the same, and the results ended up identical as well. Ramsey always awoke in a cold sweat and was overwhelmed by feelings of dread and unease. In his dream, he was always a few steps behind his wife, who would then turn to face him and run away in extreme terror. It was only in 1967 that these dreams had ended. 18 months on, and Bill woke one night to hear what he thought was the panting of a wild animal somewhere inside his bedroom. He was correct. It was Bill himself. Now, once again, there was a lull in activity for approximately 15 years. It was now 1983, and Bill was out with some friends at a local pub. Now, after several drinks, Bill began to feel the same icy chills that first manifested earlier in his life. He made an excuse and headed to the lavatory. Once there, he checked himself in the mirror and saw a wolf looking back at him. Now, that was just a precursor as to what was to happen on their way home. In the car ride, and without any warning, Bill began to growl and immediately turned to his fellow passenger. Both hands twisted into claws, and Ramsey tried to bite the leg of his friend.
That can cause an accident.
Yep. The designated driver didn't panic. He brought the car to a stop and made attempts to get the raging Bill out of the back of the car. It took several minutes and quite a bit of effort to finally get Bill out of the car, and by now the frenzy had dissipated. Worse was to come, but not for another 18 months. Shortly before Christmas 1983, Bill began to suffer from chest pains, and thoughts immediately turned to a possible heart attack. Bill checked himself into the emergency room at the local hospital and was halfway through a blood pressure examination when he sank his teeth into the arm of a nurse and ran through the ward as a man possessed.
Holy moly.
Witnesses would later reveal that Bill had hunched shoulders and both hands had curled into talons or claws and bared lips just like a rabid animal. Anyone that dared approach was knocked down easily with almost superhuman strength, and it took quite a few people working as a team to finally subdue the rampaging man. Now, a police officer managed to place handcuffs around Ramsey's wrists, but still this was not sufficient. A tranquilizer finally put an end to the outburst.
It's like you would tranquilize a wild animal.
Mm-hmm.
The following morning, the tranquilizer had worn off, and so did the original transformation. After a hearty breakfast, the attending doctor listened to the whole story and recommended that Bill remain under observation. However, he was a voluntary patient and was fully entitled to check himself out. Bill did so, but was back within the span of 2 months. In January 1984, Bill just finished a visit to his mother when he began to feel an attack coming on. He made it to the same hospital on the same terms of his previous visit. The attending nurse was alone with Ramsey in the emergency room in fear for her life once she told Ramsey that she was going to go find a doctor. Ramsey threw to one side and lunged for an orderly. By chance, 4 police officers entered the hospital, and they immediately circled Ramsey. The officers and Ramsey had a standoff for a few seconds until Ramsey began snarling and growling at all 4. The policemen advanced on Ramsey, who defended himself with some vigor. One of the 4 police officers suffered wounds so severe that he ended up in the hospital for another 4 days. Wow, that's pretty severe.
It is.
All 4 managed to handcuff Ramsey again. The short walk to the waiting squad car went off without incident, as Ramsey had apparently regained his faculties. When he arrived at the local police station, they immediately summoned the police surgeon. Ramsey considered the suggestion of checking himself into a mental institution, but decided against it, citing the stigma that he might feel in the days to follow, since he was clearly in control and rational. Ramsey was released. In the summer of 1987, he was back at the police station. This time, he was much more public-spirited. After having made a citizen's arrest to a local teenage prostitute, he drove her to the station. The second was that he parked his car, she fled into the station, and he once again felt the now familiar sensation surging from the middle of his chest. Just as a burly policeman approached the car, the officer, considerably bigger than Ramsey, started to question him and made the big mistake of gently touching Ramsey's arm. The wolf within him took immediate hold of Ramsey, and the officer was thrown to the ground and having the life choked out of him until help finally came. Ramsey was so wild that it took a dozen policemen to hold him down and 2 injections to finally restrain him. For the next 10 days, countless MRIs, X-rays, and psychiatric tests could not determine what was wrong with Ramsey. Clearly, there was some issue that needed resolving. Nobody could really switch from mild-mannered rationale to rampaging berserker and back again in the space of a few minutes unless there was something seriously wrong.
One thing that went in Bill's favor was the visit to London of American demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren, who we know very well from our past shows.
Mm-hmm.
Bill's story appeared on a television show at the time of their stay. Lorraine immediately considered that Bill was being possessed and got in touch with the Southend-on-Sea police station. After dialogue on both sides, the Warrens obtained the opportunity to talk to the Ramseys. Now, the Warrens negotiated with Bill Ramsey and finally convinced him to come to their church in Connecticut and undergo an exorcism with their own specialist, Bishop Robert McKenna. Bill relented and made the trip with his wife in 1989. A tabloid newspaper, The People, sponsored the trip. The night before the exorcism was due to take place, Ramsey tried to strangle his wife while she slept.
Yikes.
When the exorcism actually began, Bill was not at all impressed. The service was being conducted in Latin, and for half an hour, nothing happened. Then Bill took an entirely different appearance. His face contorted, and both hands formed claws. Now McKenna commanded the demon to leave. The full force of werewolf fury descended on McKenna one time, and then disappeared for good. The whole event was recorded on film.
So that's what it was, huh?
Yep. Bill Ramsey last appeared in public in 1992 when he updated his progress. Just before his exorcism, the transformations were increasing in both frequency and seriousness. Since that time, though, there have been no incidents recorded. No one has been rampaging uncontrollably through the streets of Southend-on-Sea in almost 15 years now, but Bill Ramsey has been quiet for just as long as that before.
So he hasn't given any radio interviews. He hasn't talked to anybody. He's just kind of living a private life right now.
Yeah, but nothing's happened since then. So I guess the real question is, what do you think happened to him? What do you think that this condition is? Do you think it's a real werewolf scenario?
It could be. I mean, it could be. Here we go again with another scenario where somebody is an extra sensitive. They're born to being an extra sensitive, and they probably absorbed some kind of energy that made them different.
Isn't that called possession?
Possession, yeah. Or
but that's not really an ability. Possession isn't really an ability.
Not really an ability, but you could be, but you could be sensitive and you
yes,
could attract something.
Exactly. I was just going to say that I could see it
entering your body.
Yeah. You're open to it.
You're open to it, right? That's what I meant.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly.
So and I'm maybe that's how real werewolf cases in the past got recorded or known about, was that people had the same thing he did, and they were normal people and they lived normal lives, and then all of a sudden, I mean, think of the Incredible Hulk. Isn't that kind of the same thing?
Yeah.
I mean, the comic, isn't that kind of the same
yep.
thing? He's a normal person. All of a sudden, he
can't control it.
He can't control it, and
turns into this beast.
Right, exactly. So he's kind of a werewolf in a way.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't doubt it if that was a parallel that you used for a werewolf.
Right, that he was the inspiration. A werewolf was the inspiration for that character. Yeah. So the possession, the depossessing worked. He didn't like it. He thought it was. He didn't care about it, but it worked.
Now, but this, because I've always had a problem with the Warrens claiming that they could perform exorcisms and drive demons out. I still do.
Okay.
We don't know whether what they did actually drove it out, or in fact, it decided to leave of its own accord anyway.
That's true.
And he just never had a problem again.
That's very true.
Which means he wasn't a werewolf. Correct?
No, well, it means he wasn't a werewolf. He had werewolf symptoms, is what it was. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the rage, the growling, the beast-like nature.
Right, and when you tear a fence post as a kid and
gnaw on the fence,
and you gnaw on it, that can kind of give you that idea.
Yeah.
And didn't they say that on his mind that he sweated and he had wolves on his mind, and he would bare his teeth and
yep, perspiration going down.
I mean, that poor woman. She was married to him. I mean, she probably loved her husband. I don't want to say poor woman because
three kids,
and they had probably a great relationship. Yeah. But can you imagine? She probably didn't know when it was going to happen again, and he probably was a little worried himself because he loved his wife and kids.
I'm just thinking of like Native American lore, how they claim there are lycanthropy experiences where men did turn into beasts, and there are all kinds of stories about that kind of stuff. Wendigo. I mean, there's different kind of stories about men turning into these creatures. I don't know. I don't know that I totally believe in a werewolf, but I almost believe in a werewolf as much as I believe in possession. Does that make any sense to you?
No, I agree. But I believe in a werewolf, but not necessarily a werewolf. I believe that a werewolf was probably a werewolf was probably something that happened to somebody, and it made them different, and it made them ill and different, and they couldn't get over it for a while, and then they didn't know what was going on with them, and it made people look at them that way. That's what I think a werewolf was. I don't think they were really so-called werewolves.
The howl of the moon, the wolf's bane,
yeah,
blah, blah,
I
blah.
just think they were sick, or they were mentally traumatized, or something was happening to their body, where they had a seizure, or they were having an anxiety attack or something. I don't know.
Now let's go with the seizure angle, because
Okay.
I think you could look at this a couple different ways. You could look at it as someone who's mentally ill,
Okay.
who literally has chemical imbalance and has these raging fits,
Right.
or somebody who has seizures, which a seizure triggers his actions, to where he's mentally incapacitated, he's growling, he's hunched over, he
doesn't know how to control it, and he doesn't know how to explain himself.
It's like animalistic, and everybody has an animalistic quality in them, whether they like it or not.
But didn't they claim that his physical demeanor changed? Didn't he grow? Didn't they say that more hair came out, his teeth?
Well, they described that, but was that an article of sensationalism, or did it actually happen?
Right.
The
I mean,
fact
they
that
could have imagined that because of the way he looked.
The fact that he was in the hospital and they must have done blood tests, do you think you would have found something odd, unusual? If he turned into a wolf, do you think even in 1997 someone would have snapped out a camera?
I would think so. And Mr. Bill Ramsey, if you're listening to this, we think that we feel bad about what happened, and we're not trying to put you down in any way. It's just we were wondering what was happening, how it could happen, what was happening to you. How did you feel? Have you discovered anything since then? Because if this happened to me and people explained that I turned into a weirdo every once in a while, I would want to know why.
You totally turn into a weirdo all the time.
I know, but
you don't like.
But I mean, if I went,
you don't
that
hunch
far,
over and have claw-like hands or anything. You
no,
don't bite anybody's legs.
I don't try. No, I don't try to tear fence posts and all that
bite
stuff.
People's legs.
No, no, or bite policemen, or anyway.
Well, now let's look at it this way. Think of this: if you were 9 years old and this started to happen to you on a reoccurring basis.
Well, maybe he was in pain.
Can you imagine if this happened to you, though? If you couldn't control it and this just overtook your body, your whole consciousness, and it kept happening every 15 years.
You would feel pretty awful.
Didn't it sound like it was happening every 15 years
it
the
did.
way they were describing it?
Right, and he probably felt, oh, I'm over it. I'm fine now.
And then it comes back.
He's calm, then it comes back.
I would be more terrified that the doctors couldn't find anything wrong, and then it came back.
Right. Can you imagine, coming back when something really important was going on for you? Like if you had to do a lecture, or if you had to do something that was very important, and all of a sudden it came back at a very important time.
Yeah. I mean, I would...
You're
driving. Let's say you're driving by yourself on the road.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like someone having seizures. You're terrified.
Right. Or you're going to do a public speech.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, it starts to come back.
You're in church. You're at the mall.
And you want to excuse yourself, and you can't because you have no control over it.
Yep.
That would be pretty traumatizing.
You're busy biting your wife's leg.
Right. And he did go into a hospital. He did check out the physical part of it, and they couldn't find anything really to account for it.
Nope.
So he really did try to find out what was going on.
So let's lean back over towards the possession angle.
Okay.
If this was a possession, which I think would be a precursor by an attachment. Mm-hmm. When he was 9, if something attached itself to him, and enough to where it tried to take control of him on occasion.
Yeah.
Let's say it tried to take control of him when he was 9, and that happened, and then it realized it let go, but it was still attached to him, but it didn't try and take control over him permanently. And then 15 years passed, it tried to take control of him again. So this could be an attachment that keeps trying to possess, and maybe the Warrens...
They did something that worked.
Their involvement might have scared it enough to, like, I'm just going to leave for good.
Right, because this is probably getting too far, or he was afraid that, or whatever this spirit was afraid that it was going to... Something was going to work, and he wasn't going to be able to have possession of this person anymore. People can get fear and leave over something going too far.
Of course, but I'm just thinking, look how many years it attached itself to him.
That's a long time.
That is, that's 89 was the
it
exorcism,
left.
And it started when he was 9. It had to be, I don't know how many years. When did it start saying it happened? When was the first beginning of it?
It happened when he was 9 years old. 1952, yeah.
To 1989. Look how many years that is. 47 years.
But it didn't happen all the time, so it made me wonder if there was a spirit that was traumatizing him every once in a while. Why did it decide to come back in certain intervals when he was living a normal life?
Because it's fascinated and attached to him.
Well, that's true, but
like I said, that doesn't mean it wasn't always attached. It just means maybe those times it was trying to take control of him.
Right, and it makes me wonder why. What was he doing at the time that made this spirit want to take control of him?
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if
was different.
I wonder if he had any other paranormal activity in between and around before and after that happened.
It made me wonder if we've heard the whole story.
We always do that, though. We're always like, oh, there must be more to it. But there might be.
There might be, but then there may not be.
That's true.
So then again, that goes with the first theory that I talked about, that was that somebody could be so open that they attract somebody or something, and that tends to stay with them, but it's not there all the time. But they're not a mentally ill person, so it doesn't mean that. I mean, a spirit could only handle you for so long.
We don't know that.
Well, that's true too. But think about it. We've done a lot of possession cases in the past. Think of that poor girl that didn't eat and she looked horrible. Mm-hmm. The Annalise girl. Before it wears you out. Apparently, this one. Oh yeah, because you have when you get to the point where you have no energy, you can possess something, but if it is too exhausted to even move, then there's no point. There's no life. There's no lifeblood or no life. You can't control something that you've beaten down so much that it can't even move anymore. You're not doing yourself any favors if you're taking possession. Right. So why only once in a while? Why wait a span of years? What's different about him then? I don't know. It decides, I'm going to go visit Bill. Now, I honestly think scientifically today, versus 1989 versus 2019, right. Or 2020, mm-hmm. that they would probably say he had seizures. Mm-hmm. They would probably say there was a chemical imbalance, possibly mental illness. Remember, they tried to recommend a mental facility for him, and he declined because he didn't want the stigma that goes with that. Right. I think today they would probably say he's a victim of several of those things. Could be, yeah. There's more to detect hysteria and anxiety and the patterns for that. Well, there's a lot of mental ill patients you've read about, whatever, that go into raging fits. They bite people, they kick people, they act like animals. Unfortunately, I've seen it on the Muni bus and on Market Street, sadly enough. Yeah, they bark. Yes, they do. I've seen that too. On Market Street, you're right. But they're on all fours. They bark. They bite people. They scratch. It's true. They beat people. I've seen people do it. That's mental illness. That doesn't mean they're turning into a werewolf or that they're possessed by a demon. Right. The difference with him is that he lived a normal life and he wasn't like that all the time. Right. And then after a crazy episode, he would be calm and they believe him and they let him go. Yeah. I mean, maybe he had a tumor and they didn't know. It could be. Yeah. There's so many you never knows nowadays. But it could be. I thought it was a fascinating story, though, as far as it definitely has the earmarks of a werewolf. Because they did mention that the lip, the teeth, the breaking out into perspiration. Yeah, perspiring. Yeah. Yeah. That crouched over. That sounds like hands. Somebody having anxiety or something that's attacking their body, and they're making them a seizure, making them sick. Yep. Yep. So maybe it's a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's he's sensitive and he's having some kind of a mental episode, and maybe he's having a seizure too. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Yep. I think you could look at it different ways. And unless you really had him under observation, but if it doesn't happen, nothing's changed, nothing's different, then what? Then what? Yeah. I'm almost kind of wondering rather the time to really examine all of that was when he was calm. Mm-hmm. So that they could take more tests and it wouldn't be such a big deal. rather than when he's having an episode and but he knew to rush back to the hospital. He knew what to do.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I think I would say, hey, let's do if you guys want to do every test imaginable to find out, you can. Don't charge me. And we'll see. But I don't know if maybe he didn't want to do that. Maybe he thought, you know what, I'm not having any more experiences. I did the exorcism.
He probably just wanted to get it over with.
And to think when he went to the Warrens, he was apprehensive about even doing it.
Could have been.
And that first half hour where they were speaking Latin at him, nothing happened. He's like, this is a waste of time. And then something happened.
Right.
So obviously the Warrens triggered something.
They triggered something. And it makes me wonder also, now that he's living a quiet private life, if he's studying any kind of spiritual philosophies or activities or something that's going to help him since then. I wonder if it sparked an interest in him. We won't know unless we talk to him.
I'm sure if I had that experience, I probably would I'd be so glad it didn't happen again. I would probably want nothing to do with it.
Forget it. Just to try to forget about
Honestly,
it.
You want to lead a normal life. You don't want to be a circus animal that the Ed and Lorraine Warren did an exorcism on you, right?
I believe it. I mean, being known for that in your life, I'm sure that wasn't his great idea.
No, I don't think so either.
So, well, I hope he's doing well, and I hope he's living a quiet life, and I hope whatever was bothering him it's gone.
And I hope it wasn't hereditary for his 3 kids.
No, I hope not either. That wouldn't be good.
Nope.
No, and I hope his wife and him are having a happy life.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, folks, there's another episode of Ecto Portal, and until next week, we'll say goodbye.
See you next week. Bye.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden.